Hey friends, Aaron here. We've started this new series called Troubling Scripture, and it kind of has a couple of different meanings. One is that there is stuff in the scriptures that is just troubling, and it should be troubling to us. And often it is presented to us in ways that is meant to be not troubling. But there is stuff in there about slavery that should be troubling to us. There is stuff in there about violence that should be troubling to us. There is stuff in there about taking the land from the people who are indigenous to that land. That should be troubling to us. There's stuff in there that is just misogynistic or seems or reads in a misogynistic way. That should be troubling to us. And often these stories, these passages have been presented to us from the center, from a place of power in ways that kind of dismiss the trouble of it. And I think that we are meant to be troubled by these things. I think we are meant to try and read them intelligently and compassionately and towards the aim of liberation and redemption. But I think the posture from which we read these things really matters. So if we read them as just saying, well, they must all be true according to the interpretations that we've all been given, always, there's a little bit of arrogance there. If we can only read them from the perspective of power and privilege and the center set, I think there's going to be trouble there. I think troubling Scripture means accepting that there are troubling things in Scripture and committing to taking the trouble with Scripture and troubling some of those interpretations that we have just kind of accepted in the past and saying, is there another way to read this? Can we read this redemptively? Can we read this in a way that is liberating? Can we read this in a way that is inclusive to more people? Can we read this with people who are actually being discussed in the text in lots of ways? Can we trouble Scripture? Can we take the trouble with Scripture to let it actually guide us in ways that work in the world? We believe that there is wisdom there. We believe that God is speaking through the Scriptures, but we also believe that we have to take the trouble to try and figure out what is actually being said, and that's not going to happen just on our own. We have to do that collectively. We have to listen to voices that we haven't been listening to in the past, and we have to try and say, how is this getting us closer, not just to God, but to the kind of people and the kind of communities that God has called us to be. So join us in these courses on Troubling Scripture. We're going to be looking at women in the Bible. We're going to be looking at slavery. We're going to be looking at violence. We're going to be looking at sadness. We're going to be looking at a lot of things that maybe aren't always discussed or discussed in ways that allow us to be fully and properly troubled and to find the truth in the tension of that trouble. Join us in this course, in these courses, and let us know what you're thinking as well. Let's be troubled by Scripture, and let's trouble Scripture together.